I've been promising a focus stacking tutorial for a while, so here's a good opportunity to do it. Sorry, I'll just set a couple of things about focus stacking. Doesn't work on all compositions. You really need something where there's a clear kind of linear progression through the image. So it doesn't really work on big landscape images because the stuff in the distance is too far away from the stuff in the foreground, and much better to do hyperfocal. Or in fact, check out my where to focus tutorial, which I'll put the link in up there. But this is a good example because what I have here in the composition is the path. So I've got I want to focus somewhere close on the path, somewhere about, say, this tree, and then somewhere in the distance. So a couple of tips. Get your composition set, get your exposure set, and then don't change anything when you're changing your focus point. So I'm going to run you through that now. So hopefully you can see I've got my focus, I'm on autofocus. Normally I'd lock off focus for an image like this, but I've got my composition set, I've got my exposure set. In fact, I'm going to drop my exposure just a tad, I think. So about there. So I'm going to focus on this path here. And then I've taken one there, I'm going to focus on the tree over here. I'm going to focus right in the distance, so on these bushes over here. So what I have now are 3 images with different focal points, and when I get back onto my computer, I'll be able to use Lightroom to sort out the exposure, but I'll use Photoshop to do the stacking, and I'll show you how to do that coming up soon. So I'm back from the woods, actually. It's about 10 days since I took those photos in the woods, so it's not as if I've just got home and sat down. But what I'll do is I'll get into Lightroom and Photoshop and show you the 2 options that I have for focus stacking. One of them very, very, very quick. The other one a little bit more complicated, but actually also quite quick. So I'll show you the 2 options and then come back to you. So here we go with the first very simple process. I've got the 3 images that I focus stacked in the woods open in Lightroom, and I've done a very quick bit of processing, nothing too complicated, just really quick. And one thing I would recommend is to apply the same process, because obviously you take the images at the same time, so not much changes. So apply the same process to all 3 images, or you could be using 5, 6, 7 images, but in this case it's 3. And the easiest way to do that is process one image, then select all 3 and just click sync over here, click check all and synchronize, and that will copy the alterations you made to the first image across all 3. So you'll have them all processed in exactly the same way. One thing I would recommend not doing is don't go into detail and do any sharpening or any noise reduction, because obviously you're about to have a process that is looking at the focus, so there's no need to go into sharpening yet. It might be that once you've processed the images and stacked them, you want to come back to it in Lightroom and do a little bit sharpening, so stay away from sharpening. So once you've got the images processed how you would like them, you've then got them all selected. As I say, 3 or more, could be 2, but 3 or more, or, you know, up to as many as you like. You then right click, go up to edit in, come across here, and the bottom option is open as layers in Photoshop. Click that, and depending on how speedy your system is, it will open those 3 images as layers in Photoshop. My system's a little bit slow at the moment because I've got so much going on, so it'll take a little while, but we'll follow it over into Photoshop in just a second. So there we go, all the images have copied over into Photoshop as layers. You can see the 3 layers here on the right hand side, and the first thing I want to do is select all three images. So you can see because they've changed that shade, that means all three are selected. Go over to Edit, scroll down and select Auto Align Layers. Um, choose the auto option there and click OK. And what that does is it just makes sure that the layers are lined up. And the best way of thinking about it is imagine you've got a deck of cards that you've shuffled and they're not quite lined up. And you know, you'll just tap them on the table and push them all back together so they're all perfectly aligned. And that's just in case you have, when you were taking those three images, the camera might have moved very slightly, or you know, you might have accidentally nudged it. So you just want to make sure they're all lined up and exactly the same. If they're not lined up, the process will struggle. And then this very, very quick process for stacking is go back to Edit, click Auto Blend Layers, and that you then want to choose Stack Images, Seamless Tones and Colors. I also check Content Aware. Fill transparent areas, click OK, and that will process. Now, this is a really, really quick process for stacking images. I know some people don't like it. Some people think it, because what you're relying on Photoshop to do the thinking for you and selecting the sharpness. But it actually can work very, very well and it's very quick. So what happens, obviously, over here, what Photoshop has done is selected what it thinks are the sharpest areas from the image and then blended them together into one layer. So this top layer here, so it says merged here. And you can see the boxes next to each layer indicates where Photoshop has identified the areas of focus. And I can see from this image it's struggled a little bit, probably because the image is so complex. There's lots of lines, lots of leaves, lots of different shades and whatnot. So it's struggled a little bit, but let's just zoom in and see. I actually think it's done a relatively good job. Kind of these bushes are in focus. The foregrounds are in quite good focus. So it's done a relatively good job. So, you know, if I was doing a quick edit, I'd be reasonably happy with that. Where it works really, really well is if you've got very angular, uncomplex scenes. So something like maybe a city scene, like looking down a city road, or somewhere, you know, somewhere where there's just a clear uncluttered, I think the word is looking for, an uncluttered scene. But anyway, that's the first process. What you have to do then is go to Layer and click Merge Visible, and then that will shrink it down to that one image, that one layer, and then you can take that back to Lightroom and do any further editing you want. So that's the very, very quick process.
So that's the first process. Very, very simple. It's a couple of clicks. I didn't count it, but it's maybe once you've got into Photoshop, it's maybe 3 or 4 clicks. As I mentioned while I was making the film, it works okay. Sometimes actually it works very well. It depends on the image. That image that I was using then was a little bit more complicated because there's lots of leaves and branches and things. So Photo Shelter struggles with that a bit. But actually, sometimes that's all you need to do your focus stacking is those few clicks, and the process works quite well. But it's worth knowing that one and this second process, which is a little bit more complicated but gives better results on complicated issues. So we'll get into that one as well in the computer.
So on this second technique, you start in exactly the same process. So I have my 3 images open over here on the layers panel. Just select all of those images so you see it turns to a different shade of grey, and go over to Edit and Auto Align Layers. Leave that on auto and click, and it's exactly the same process in the first step that I've just showed you. It takes a couple of seconds, and they're now lined up. You might notice there's that little white line. I'll zoom in a little bit. There's a tiny white line at the bottom. Maybe only a a hawk-eyed person would spot it, but that probably means that the camera moved slightly. But I can crop that out later. I won't do that now, but I'll crop that out later. So here I have my three images. I'm going to unselect them. So this one is the image with the focus in the foreground. Um, that's the middle image here is the image with the focus in the midground, and then the final image is the focus on these bushes over here. So I'm just going to click the eye there, so I'm not looking at that image, and go to the middle one. Come down here to the bottom, and there's a button that looks a rectangle with a circle in the middle. That's adding a layer mask. Click on that and it'll come up, and there's a white box appears next to the image that you're looking at. That means you've added the layer mask. But what you need to do is just click Control and I to invert that. It's very important you do that. And then what you simply do, press B to select your brush, and that then pops up as a circle. The brush tool comes up as a circle, and you can make that bigger and smaller using your square brackets. So smaller left square bracket, bigger right square bracket, and then you just paint across the middle of the image. I'm holding my mouse down, just painting across the middle of that image, and you'll see if you look back over here where the layer mask is, the middle of the image is now white. So that's what you've painted in. You've painted in that focus in the middle. And of course, this tree here was an area of focus. So I can just make my brush about the size of the tree and just brush the focus up on the tree. So I'm not sure you'll be able to see that when I've uploaded this, but the tree is now focused up in the middle. And then I just need to repeat that step for the final layer. So click that layer. I'm going to turn that middle layer off. Click that layer. Come back down again. Add a layer mask. Press Control and I to invert it. I'll make my brush a little bit bigger, and then I just paint across the background of that image. The bits over here. I'm doing this quickly. You can, if you wanted to, you could go in, zoom in. Zoom in and paint in, very fine detail around the edge of the tree. Well, that's a good example. So, if you wanted to paint the fine detail in around the edge of the tree, you could go and be more precise about that. But I'm doing this relatively quickly to show you the process. So I've now got over here on the right again. You can see where I've painted in the focus from that layer. I'm going to select them all. Select all of the layers, come over to layer, and then scroll down, and near the bottom you'll see merge visible. Click merge visible. The job's done. So you probably won't be able to see this on Lightroom, but what I now have is my focus painted in right across, and it's the whole of that image, and it's that simple. Only takes maybe a minute each image. What I need to do now is save that, and I'd go back into Lightroom to do a bit of cropping, bit of alteration, but my focus stacking is done.
So there you have it. The second option, as I mentioned, a little bit more complicated. A few more buttons to press, but not many. And there's only actually maybe 3 or 4 steps. But painting in the sharpness, the focus, works really well, and you can actually see as you paint. It's probably it won't transmit very well onto YouTube, but I can see as I'm painting, I can see the focus being painted in. So hopefully kind of 2 options then for focus stacking. One, super quick, which can give good results. But also one probably just takes a couple of minutes more. But actually, once you've done it a couple of times, it becomes like second nature, and the process goes very, very well. So hopefully you found that that useful and informative. Final thing I should say is, have you checked out my website? The links are below. Have a look at my website or check out my Instagram. I'm quite active on Instagram, so check them both out. The links are below. And if you've got any questions, let me know. Don't forget, if you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button down in the corner, and don't forget to click the bell, because then you get notification. Final piece. I'm doing a bit of market research, so if you've got a preferred day and time for me to post my videos, because I've tried during the week and I've tried at the end of the week. Let me know which would work best for you, and I might be able to alter it. At the moment, I'm publishing on a Sunday, but if another day and another time works better, happy to shift it. So, hope you found that useful. Hope you found it informative, and I look forward to seeing your comments. Cheers. Bye bye.